You are now live.
We are live. Okay, we are back. In committee, we are just exploring potential revenue sources. And Dan, I don't know what Graham had prepared for us. I think tomorrow he was going to go through alternative makeups for a child or family or whatever you want to call it, tax credit. And I'm going to turn it over to you. We're looking at sugar sweetened beverages later today. I think we should just say as a coverall, we understand that the governor opposes all of these. So any mention of anything is no endorsement of him. But why don't you walk us through whatever you have for us?
Okay, thank you, committee. Dan Dickerson from the Joint Fiscal Office. My understanding was that you intended to talk specifically about DFR, Department of Financial Regulation fees today. And given that in the past, I've been sort of the fee, I wouldn't call myself a guru, but I guess within JFO, I've been the most knowledgeable person on fees. Graham wanted me in there to back him up, and then he went home not feeling well, so I'm the primary now. So I prepared a document. I don't know if you all have it in front of you, but it basically, I think my understanding is
it should be up on our website.
okay.
It hasn't.
Are you all prepared for me to start walking through it, or do you want me to give
Yeah, can you share screen?
Sure, I can do that.
That might be the easiest way to make sure we've all got it.
This is the one I want. Yeah.
There it goes. I think you need to make it a little bigger for us.
Let's see here.
All right, gotta be a little bigger than that.
Yeah, give me just a second here to. Oops.
Oh, that's good and big. All right.
Okay. So this is a sheet that came to Graham from DFR, and I've modified it a little bit. So I'll just go through how everything's labeled. So on the left where you see shading is just they've broken out the fees into the various, I guess, configurations of entities that they regulate. So there's securities, there's the banking industry. Sorry, I'm scrolling really fast. There's insurance, the captives, various fines, and then exams. And then at the top, there's the fee type. The last year the fee was changed. The current fee level, approximate number of filings, and then where I've expanded it is as I've sort of based on the fee and the filings. For the fees that raise over 500,000 annually, I've given you the amount of revenue, the amount of annual revenue. I've given the fund that fees are deposited into. DFR has various special funds. Most of those funds get swept at the end of the year into the general fund in the event that there's unused or I guess revenue that isn't used for their operating costs. So there's the Securities Regulation Supervision Fund. Obviously, there's a few that go straight to the general fund. There's the Financial Institution Supervision Fund that collects the banking revenues. That one isn't, to my knowledge, and I dug through the statutes, unless it's buried somewhere else, I don't believe that it's swept at the end of the year. There's the Insurance Regulatory and Supervision Fund that deals with the insurance industry. That one is swept to the general fund. There's the Captive Insurance Regulatory and Supervision Fund, which is also swept. And I believe that's all the funds. So I guess any questions on the makeup of this document?
I was just curious when I noticed 116,000 security sales representatives, that's 18% of the population. I realize it's national, but that's a huge number.
That is a
People trying to
huge
sell us
number.
securities,
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are the ones licensed in our state.
yeah.
and they may be from anywhere,
A lot of these are compact things, so, yeah, if you're gonna sell one thing, you're licensed here.
but I wonder if you could scroll down. There was another number where I saw the number of filings was over 400,000. I was wondering what that was.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Insurance appointments. Yeah, this is one that I believe used to be a fee that was paid biennially, and it was most recently a $120 fee. And then starting this fiscal year, FY22, it was reduced to a $60 fee that's now collected annually. And so I don't know how that will impact the appointments. Maybe somebody from DFR could speak to that, but the 425, I believe, is the number that came to Graham from them.
What is an appointment?
Yeah, so that is the insurance producer. You see that line there, the 173,000.
Yeah.
It's when the producer is appointed with a company to sell the product. So you could have one producer, one insurance agent, and they could have 5 different appointments, 3 with various auto insurers, 2 with various homeowners insurers. And that would be 5 appointments. And it's actually the company that pays those appointment fees. So, those various companies would pay that $60 fee per the number of insurance producers they had appointed here in Vermont.
I would assume, though, based on these numbers, both for insurance producers and the other number that we saw, this is a huge number of people compared to the population of the state, which would suggest that most of these things are being paid by people from outside of Vermont.
Yes.
That's the whole thing we
And-
did with the broker fees.
Well, again, that's again, the 170, that's 27% of the population of Vermont. And it would seem that if there's a place in which we want to increase a fee, it's not on $1 million homes, it's on this.
Well, we
Well,
did
we'll look
that.
at it.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to point
again.
out, and I don't know, the DFR folks might back me up, but some of these are retaliatory. So the insurance agent application fee, and I believe the producer fee, which means when it's retaliatory, it means if we increase our fee, or let's say somebody that lives in Vermont pays us a $30 fee, and then they go register in New Hampshire, and let's say New Hampshire charges, I don't know, $150 fee. We can then charge somebody from New Hampshire the difference, gosh, why am I terrible at doing math? The $120 difference. And that's actually further down on this sheet under this retaliatory fee line. This is where we're collecting revenue from folks out of state that charge higher fees. And so if you raise the producer fee here and increase this revenue, you're going to actually decrease, I believe you'll decrease this revenue. So it'll sort of wash out. So while I've shown.
That's a question is, would it be a washout if you did that?
So, Madam Chair, we did this, I think, I'm not sure you're on the committee,
I remember
brokers fees.
yes, I was here for the 19,
Okay, so.
which I think was the last time we
Okay,
raised
we
them.
raised a lot of money by raising the broker fee, and Commissioner Pichek's predecessor came in and warned us on the retaliatory thing.
Yes.
And she said, don't do it. And it turned out there was no retaliatory provision in this, and we did it, and we raised $6 million because 99.9% of the brokers were out of state, but they wanted to have a license to sell to a Vermont consumer. So I think what we need for this chart, if this is a ripe area, we need to know what the range of fees are among the states. Are we high? Are we low? Are we in the middle? Because when we saw those broker fees, we were very low. And I don't know that we've heard any fallout from doing that.
Yeah, I would be very interested in effect doing some gaming that would tell us, in the event that we raise the fee, what the retaliatory fee we might face in return is, because I see there's only 6,000 in the retirement fee category and 173,000 in the agent category, and that's suggestive to me.
Mhm.
Dan, which was the one we did feels like 4 or 5 years ago where we collected millions in new fees. I think it was brokers.
that- That was the insurance appointments fee that I believe you raised.
So,
And then also there was there were a few of them. So insurance appointments, and then security sales representatives.
I thought it was
I
security.
think it's the top one.
Well, there's a bunch that you raised in 2019.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the last time. And these were traditionally on that 3-year cycle, right? That we looked at them every 3 years or some. But the one that's come up, because it got sent to us from the House, was the mutual fund fee.
Mhm.
Yeah, this
Um,
is the one highlighted in yellow, the securities
That
registry.
is, that's the securities. Okay, we did that one, right, in 16? Is that the one they're proposing?
That seems like the date that when we did that, so that may have been it. I remember recalling, yeah, security brokers, if you have a broker here in Vermont, he or she gets registered in every state
Right.
in the country, because he may have a customer in Texas.
Mhm.
So he pays a,
Right.
and the Merrill Lynches of the world, they pay the fee for the broker.
Okay,
I don't remember the fee being that
Dan,
high.
what fee did the House look at? Was it the
The
security?
the
It was
one in-
the same
highlighted in yellow on the screen, the
Okay.
securities registration fee,
Okay.
they've in, I think S53 is what Graham told me the bill was. There's a $2,000 initial fee and then a $1,500 renewal. I believe they raised the renewal fee to $1,750, which raised about 6 million.
Yeah, okay. So that's the one that's in there. Yeah, 6 million is the number I've heard to raise that. That was part of the S53 package when they thought they needed to pay a lot. S53 is still in the churning stage because there's revenue loss, and we didn't raise any revenue because we didn't lose any revenue. But eventually we're going to conference, and eventually everything will balance out. Always does. But that's there, but I thought, because these fees haven't been coming through, it might just, be helpful to talk about because they are generally not paid by Vermonters. And I don't think we should be out gouging anyone, but I think we should probably be in that, the middle of the pack. And I'm not sure how we assess that, so.
Can we get this chart with the range
Yeah.
of other states that they charge?
Was really what the impact would be for every dollar change that we make in one of these fees, what would be the retaliatory fee effect that would be contrary to that on us? That's really what we need to know, if it's possible to do that.
I think back when you changed the broker fee in 2019, I think DFR might have provided some of that other state information. Otherwise, I might have it somewhere, because I know I've looked into this in the past, at least for the mortgage, or not the mortgage, the mutual funds. But I think that information is out there, and I could probably get it relatively easily for next time.
Was mutual fund, was that changed solely for registration, or wasn't there something that was done within the last few years that related to mutual fund sales fees?
That I'm unsure of. I believe it was just the registering of those funds that was done back in 2016, and it raised a lot of money.
Okay, Senator Bray has a question.
Yeah.
Senator Hardy, did you have your hand up?
Thanks. So understand I just want to make sure I check out the retaliatory math and make sure I understand it. So if we're looking at the very first line, 116,000 security sales representatives, if Vermont had 1,000 of them and we raised our fee, I don't know, $100. And so that means 100 Vermonters filing in other states might see a fee increase of $100 to compensate. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe I can just clarify just a little bit.
Might be time to go to the commissioner.
So on the retaliatory question, there is no retaliatory regime on the securities fees. There's no retaliatory regime on the banking fees. And there's no retaliatory regime on the captive fees. The retaliatory regime is on the insurance fees only. But again, another piece of nuance here, they don't apply to the appointments. So the retaliatory regime is on those insurance licenses, but not on the appointments. So when we changed the appointments in the last couple of years, that did not have a retaliatory impact, meaning our retaliatory tax didn't go down, and Vermonters doing business here weren't asked to pay more in other states. The retaliatory structure is set up to disincentivize states, pitting their fees against each other. So the way it does that is this retaliatory tax that if you have relatively low fees, you have, or even in the middle of the pack, and I think that's kind of where we are on the insurance side, is middle of the pack. You get this retaliatory tax from all of the other states that have higher fees than you, and your in-state residents get the benefit of paying lower fees in Vermont, but also if they register in other states. If you raise the fee so that you're above the average, your retaliatory tax would go down, and Vermonters doing business in Vermont but registering in other states would end up having to pay more. So that's sort of the structure that's unique to those insurance fees that they have created. And I'll just say it's probably one of the more complicated things in terms of how that calculation runs, certainly of all the fees, but probably even of all of the work we do at DFR. Is probably one of the most complicated regimes there to try to match it up dollar for dollar.
Well, can I follow up just so I'm getting close here. So there are the most ripe ones, if you want to call it that, are those for which there's no retaliatory regime. And for those that haven't, if there were 100, to make it simple, 100 Vermonters that were going to pay a higher fee in other states because we raised ours, can't that be offset by the fact that there might be 21,000 other representatives paying a higher fee in Vermont, so that it comes a net plus to the state? That's what I'm wanting to understand better.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the theory. Like I said, I find it very challenging to start at point A and get to point B and fully understand how the transaction and payment went, just to be quite frank. But the theory is that you would have a revenue that if you increase those fees, you would have a revenue neutral impact, but your home state producers would end up paying more in the other states that they're registering in, where your state's fee is higher than that state's fee. So that's the theory. Like I said, to run it through the calculation and to show how that plays itself out, we'd be happy to do it and provide more detail on that, but it is quite complicated.
Okay. Well, and maybe there are fees on this table that are promising because of their volume and also because there's no retaliatory regime. So it may be not worth doing the homework on.
Yeah, I think we're getting really into the weeds, and the purpose of doing this, and I know that the administration opposes any raises, is in case we need some additional revenue, Are there fees out there that have not been raised in a while? They used to be on the 3-year cycle that that might be below the national, we might be a low hanging fruit on. And Commissioner, are there any out there that come to mind, or?
Yeah, so I would say, and we're very diligent about these fees, looking at when they were last updated, looking at where we sit relative to other states in the region and nationally as well. So the ones that haven't been changed for a while, those are the ones that, have the retaliatory piece connected to them. The other thing I'll just say is the banking division, unlike securities, insurance, and captive insurance, it's a self-funded division. So there's no budgeted surplus from banking. So if you increase the banking fees, it wouldn't follow through in our bottom line and get to the direct app. And those fees are the amount of filers in those fees aren't significant to begin with. It wouldn't generate significant, increase. And then the other piece I'll just mention is on the captive side. The captive team is obviously very cognizant of cost across the board because, that's a little fee relative to what they pay, but they pay in 28 million in captive premium tax as well. So fees are very sensitive in the captive insurance area. We have to make sure we remain competitive there to have all the benefits of captive insurance. So the places where the places where those things don't exist and where entities or people have to register, and they basically do it nationwide because it's a lot easier to register everybody than to have a compliance program that assures you don't have a client that moved to Vermont and you were unaware of it, or you have a sales rep that sells into Vermont and you were unaware of it. That's the appointment fee on insurance that we've dealt with, just in the last couple of years. That's the security sales representative or the broker dealer fee that we dealt with in 2019. And then that would also be the mutual fund fee or the securities registration fee that we dealt with in 2016. So those are the three that really don't have any sort of asterisks next to them where it would put us at a competitive disadvantage. It would have a retaliatory impact, or it wouldn't generate revenue because it's part of a self-funded separate division. So those are the three that, as you can see, have moved, have changed in the last few years. That's why those are the ones that have changed. And what I would say on the security sales rep, where we're at $120, that I would say we're in the, I can go and I'll double check and we'll provide this to the committee, but I believe we're in the top 10 states for that fee. So I believe it's Puerto Rico and Pennsylvania are in like the 130 or 150 range, but many of the other states are down into the 100 and below 100. And there's even, I think, a state or two that's at like $10 or something. So we're definitely not average on that one. I would say we're sort of toward the top. And then on the mutual fund fee, where we're at $2,000 initial, $1,500 renewal. I only know of one other state in the country that has a higher number than us, and that's Rhode Island. They recently moved their initial and their renewal to $1,750. I think they did that in the last 3 or 4 years after we did ours. So they're the only state that I know that's higher than ours. In that mutual fund category, I think 90 or 95% of them are renewal filings. There's only a handful of initial filings. So if you move that renewal to $1,750, you're picking up a large majority of those 2,600 filers. So that's how that one works. And then on the appointments, the fact that we're doing it every year now instead of every other year, that helped smooth our revenues out so that we didn't have these big up and downs. But we also resulted in collecting a little bit more revenue overall over those 2 years than we would have collected in a single up year. So we just dealt with that in 2019, and the final smoothing out just happened in 2021. So I would say the three that are the most obvious that don't have a lot of strings attached, if you will, are ones that have recently been moved or reviewed. And generally they're at the upper end compared to the other states. But what we would be happy to do if it's of interest is for the appointments, for the mutual funds, and for the broker dealers, we can get you 3 different spreadsheets that show Vermont and every other state. And that might be helpful for your knowledge.
Okay, Senator Sorokin.
Could you just, I know Senator Brock asked this question earlier. What is the insurance appointment? Are those insurance agents?
Yeah, so it's the insurance agents and their actual literal appointment with a company. So it's that producer to company relationship that allows the producer to sell the product for the company. So, you're acting at.
If I have a local agency, like the Essex agency, they do business with Concord. Concord signs a letter saying you can represent and sell my product. And every time they do that, they got to pay a $60 fee.
Once a year, yes.
And is that paid for by the insurance company or by the local agent?
Yeah, it's paid for by the insurance company. We'll send Concord an invoice and say, we have record of 60 people appointed with you. Here's the here's the grand total for everybody, and the company will pay those fees. Now, as far as I know, they don't try to recoup that from the producers, but the company is responsible for those relative to our department.
And how does that work on a national level? I know the broker fees, the Merrill Lynch brokers of the world are all paying in to that registration fee, but I don't know where Concord is. I mean, they're in Vermont, right? Or
they're New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Okay, so they pay on every broker that they register, every agent that they register around the country. But to Vermont, they only pay on the Vermont agents, right?
Yeah, that's right. But not every single state, but I think if I remember correctly, majority of states have appointment fees. So, and I think Kevin might have something to add too, but it would depend on what the fee is for that particular state.
Got it.
And for domestic companies, they're exempt from appointment fees.
How does it get to 425,000? If we're just collecting the $60 on every Vermont insurance agent, as Senator Brock says, now we're up to like 80% of the state are insurance agents.
Possible.
The
Okay,
lion's share of those appointment counts are generated by non-resident producers. So, the lion's share of producers in total, which is almost 80,000, are non-resident.
Oh, so I can
And
buy,
just-
I can buy insurance from an insurance agent in California if I wanted to.
Well, because of just wanting to be compliant, and that producers may be writing outside their state of where they reside. Many producers are just for compliance safety, they get
Right.
licensed in any state they may potentially do business. Otherwise, they'll be in non-compliance with the licensing requirements.
Okay.
So they get licensed here, just like they would in any other state. So all the major national writers are going to be licensed here, and if they're licensed with a company that has multiple writing companies, each one of those writing companies requires an appointment. So that's where the numbers start to multiply, is because it's not just how many companies you're representing, but how many writing insurance companies, underwriting companies, those companies have. So one producer could have tens of appointments.
Right.
okay. I got Senator Hardy, then Senator Brock, and then we're gonna have to move along because we've got sugar sweetened beverages coming up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, you mentioned the captives fees, and you said that you needed to stay competitive with them, but there are a couple in there that haven't been raised since 1981, which I think is the origination of the captives legislation. So how is it that they're not competitive with other states if they've been that level for, 30, 40 years?
We cut those.
Daniel, would you be able to go down to the captive licenses or registrations?
There's one that's the exam fee, and then there's the other that is the insurance registrations.
Yeah, so take the exam fee, for example. There's some states that don't require an exam at all. So you would pay $0 in that instance. There's some that pay, well, I think that's the best example probably is the states that really don't require to do any examination. So the fact that we require the examination is something that we need to be mindful of. The other thing I'd mention though is within the exam, we have multiple people that work on them and they charge by the hour back to the company. So it's a revenue neutral situation in terms of hours worked. And for those fees, for those hourly rates, we will look at those regularly. And I believe we increased them just in the last 5 years. So as part of the exam, there's a fee, but there's, the cost to conduct the exam. And then there's also, the fact that they also pay premium tax. And some of these other captive jurisdictions, they don't do examinations at all, and they don't have to pay any premium tax. So it's really on the captive side, it's really a bundle. It's hard to look at just one thing in terms of how competitive we are relative to other jurisdictions. And we're more expensive than almost every other jurisdiction. And that's part of what makes us build out this regulatory regime. And that's in some ways what makes us competitive. But it's really hard for a board of directors when they're deciding between Vermont and Washington, D.C., if we're much, much, much more expensive, even with our gold standard and our reputation, it's hard for the board of directors to approve to go to Vermont over DC. So we want to remain competitive with our most direct competition, if you will, in terms of other jurisdictions. And I would just say we look at it holistically, not necessarily on one single prong.
And the market it used to be just Vermont. And in my time here, more and more states have been, and a lot of it is they're offering less regulation, thus less cost. And ours has been the gold standard. You do have to take an exam to be here. Okay, we're gonna need to move. I've got Senator Brock.
Mine is just a quick question. I noticed in some of the insurance categories, for example, insurance adjuster and public adjuster, there's zeros in a whole list. Is it because some of those folks are regulated under another category or what?
Oh, I think on public adjuster, I'll let Kevin answer, but I think there are some categories where you just don't have anybody. We just don't have anybody registered under that particular license type. There's not that.
Just insurance adjuster also is a zero. It just seems unusual to me that there are no insurance adjusters in Vermont.
There are.
Yes. So that would be one. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm not seeing what that heading is. Is that just a count?
Yeah, the one that's the third column over is a count.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the number of units that are paying the fee.
Okay.
So it says there are none in Vermont.
There are we're doing the adjuster renewals now. So there's a number of licensed adjusters. So I'm not sure why that count would be zero unless it's stated somewhere else. I don't have the whole chart to look at it once. Is it
an annual fee, Kevin, or biannual?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, good point. So that's a biennial. The adjusters is still a biennial.
So we might have.
We do the adjusters are done in the even years, and then the producers are done in the.
So that is a 2021 chart.
I think this might have been when Graham got it when he was working on these fees last session.
So that would make sense.
Your chart went down and now we're seeing your folders and everything. You might not want to be showing that.
Sorry about
Okay,
that.
we're gonna move on. We can get printed copies of this, and we're gonna move on.
Well, I
Thank
think it may be
you.
important, just if nothing else, because if we're only looking at a single year, then the totals of the amount of money that we're raising from fees may be inaccurate.
Right.
It's so exciting to see you excited about fees, Randy.
We won't tell the governor.
Out of state fees.
We have it on camera.
Okay, we do need to track down why there are zeros there, and, I think the combined wisdom of this group can help us figure that out and just let us know. So we're gonna go from securities fees to sugared beverages.
Sugar daddies.
So in our quest, and we're gonna switch commissioners. Thank you, everyone. We've got,
Thank you.
thank you, Kevin. You've been with us this afternoon. I'm gonna get your bill out.
That's appreciated.
Next week.
I'll sleep better.
Okay, so this is Abby. And I'm jumping all over the place now here. Okay, Abby, what have you got? This was just, there isn't bill floating around on sugar sweetened beverages? No, there have been.
There have been, that's correct. So for the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel. What I've prepared is a summary of a bill that was introduced this year in the House, or sorry, last year, this biennium in the House. And it's very similar to the other iterations of this idea of an excise tax on sugar sweetened beverages over the last more than a decade. I have a list of the bills that have been introduced. All of those that I found were in the House. And they're all very similar, and they are, as I said, an excise tax, and all of them were either 1 cent or 2 cents per ounce of sugar sweetened beverages or syrup or powder that is used to make those beverages. So what I prepared was just sort of the main points of what these bills do, what's exempt, what the definitions are, and then there are some administrative provisions in all of those bills. Would you like me to walk you through that, or would you like to see the bill language of the most recent bill?
Committee, what would be most helpful at this point? Let's do a 10,000 foot walkthrough,
Sure,
just to see what's being proposed.
excellent. Would you like me to share my screen, or do you have it all in front of you? Summary?
Do we have committee? I have to keep faith on my screen. So,
Share the screen would be best.
so sharing the screen, I think, would be best.
Great, give me just a moment. Sorry. There. Can you see?
Yep.
Okay. So it should say Senate Finance, April 7th, 2022. Great.
Yep.
Okay. So as I just mentioned, there was one bill introduced this biennium, and that was H37. That was introduced last year. But it was during the same biennium. So it is currently on the wall, I believe, in the House Ways and Means Committee. It imposes a tax on distributors that is 1 cent per ounce of sugar sweetened beverages, syrup, and powder. I did put in parentheses there because my understanding is that JFO looked at a different bill, H343, to base their estimate on. Primarily, that was a 2 cent per ounce tax.
Okay.
The bill provides actually a large part of the language in that bill sets out many definitions. The first is a sugar sweetened beverage. So what does that include? It means any non-alcoholic beverage, carbonated or non-carbonated, that is intended for human consumption as a beverage and contains any added sweetener. So that for the purposes of this definition and this tax-based non-alcoholic beverage means any beverage that contains less than 1/2 of 1% alcohol per volume. The definitions explain what sweetener means, which is any caloric substance suitable for human consumption that humans perceive as sweet and includes sucrose, fructose, glucose, and other sugars or fruit juice concentrates, but does not include any substance that adds fewer than 5 calories per reference amount customarily consumed or per labeled serving. The language does also impose the same 1 cent per ounce tax. It has it both on sugar sweetened beverages and on syrups and powders. So a syrup is a liquid mixture of ingredients used in making, mixing, or compounding sugar sweetened beverages using one or more other ingredients such as water, ice, powder, simple syrup, fruits, vegetables, fruit juice, vegetable juice, or carbonation or other gas. And powder is any solid mixture of ingredients used in making, mixing, or compounding sugar sweetened beverages by mixing the powder with any one or more other ingredient. And again, including water, ice, syrup, simple syrup, fruits, vegetables, fruit juice, vegetable juice, or carbonation or other gas. For the syrup and the powder per ounce charge, per ounce tax, it is determined based on how much the manufacturer requires of that powder or syrup to make the actual drink, the sugar sweetened beverage. There are quite a few exemptions, and this I have summarized, or I've listed the exemptions that are in H37, and that's where I found most variation across the years of what was in and out of the tax base. So this seems to be one of the longer lists over the years. It seems like there were new types of exemptions added as this bill has been taken up over different sessions. So the H37 list of exempt products, all of them had non-taxable sales, so the US government can't tax federal government, sales for resale or consumption outside the state. So for purposes of resale, typically you don't tax business input. So if it's a wholesaler buying it to then resell, that wouldn't be taxable, or if it's for use or consumption outside the state. Beverages without caloric sweeteners, so that includes water, coffee, and tea, but again, only if they don't have sweeteners. Beverages in which milk or a milk substitute, such as soy milk or rice milk or another substitute, is the primary ingredient or the first listed ingredient on the label of the beverage. Infant formula was made exempt, beverages for medical use, and 100% natural fruit or vegetable juice were all exempt. The next there were a few sections. I've just tried to summarize it to give you the high level overview. This is creating a new tax. So there are administrative provisions included in the bill language. Returns are required to be filed on similar due dates as to sales and use tax, meals and room tax, the 25th of every month. Licenses are required. Record keeping requirements are also imposed. It creates new administrative requirements. It does allow for penalties and interest to be imposed. There is a bonding provision, which is somewhat unusual. I believe that is also included in some of the cigarette and tobacco products taxes, but that's a little unusual compared to sales and use and meals and rooms taxes. Again, this is an excise tax, whereas those are retail taxes. It also, in this particular iteration, did create a special fund for the excise tax revenues. Each bill sort of had a different goal in mind of how the revenues would be used. This bill introduced last session was for the Adverse Childhood Experiences Initiative Fund. And lastly, it did impose a requirement that the Department of Health assess the impact that the tax has on consumer purchasing and health outcomes. So I will pause there. Actually, I did want to make two little other side notes. In all of these bills, one thing that was not included and could be a potential policy decision, none of the bills passed the tax on to the consumer, which the tobacco products tax, for example, does do. It requires the wholesaler to include that in the final price to the consumer when they buy the product. So that was just one thing that I noticed that I wanted to flag for you. So all of these have hyperlinks if you did want to go through and look at the language. So I will stop sharing. Not sure if there are any questions.
At this point, I think that just gives us enough to get oriented. And I think we'll have Patrick talk to us about money, and then Commissioner Bolio.
Sure. So Pat Titterton, JFO. I have a short presentation that I prepared, but to be honest, the first, all the way until the end, it's mostly just background, which I think Abby just covered pretty well. So I can share my screen and we can jump ahead to what you're probably most interested in.
Bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did two different iterations based on, what's historically been introduced, either the 1 cent or 2 cent per ounce tax. And so for the 1 cent, we've estimated that that'll bring in about 17.2 million annually. And then for the 2 cent, that would bring in about 29 million. And we got to these numbers by, triangulating a few different sources, looking at, both some academic and research resources and also some, experiences that a couple of cities in the country have had with imposing taxes like this.
Okay. The 29 million is a nice number. I've heard this also talked about as a source for school meals, which would line up.
And that's where the 29 million for schools came from.
Yeah, well, that's the estimated cost for schools, somewhere in there, 29 to 30 million.
Does that assume that there will be a decrease in sales by virtue of adding the tax?
I doubt it.
It does actually. So concept you're probably familiar with, even if you don't know the name, is so sort of price elasticity. So, the more a good price of a good increases, the less people are likely to want to consume. So, I mean, one way you can sort of see that here is that, going from doubling the tax from 1 to 2 doesn't necessarily double our revenue estimate here. So it is accounting for, expected decrease in consumption.
Which originally was one of the goals, is it's taken, we're not taxing fruit juice, but it's come in, I think, before with corn syrup and other things that we are not healthy, and it is definitely part of it is trying to discourage consumption. That's why we keep increasing the cigarette tax. Okay, questions at this point? I'm going to turn the floor over to Commissioner Bolio. If he's here. There he is. Okay, Commissioner, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Craig Bolio, Tax Commissioner. I don't have a ton to say today, but a few things. I'll start with, I think my headline is, the governor has made it extremely clear this year that he has no interest in new taxes, especially given the extraordinary fiscal position that the state finds itself in this year, with opportunities to provide significant tax relief as outlined in the governor's recommended tax package, as opposed to needing to talk about new taxes. And when it comes to this particular idea, recognizing, again, there's a number of different frameworks that have been put out there, but there's a few questions that I'd really encourage the committee to consider. The first would be, is the main goal revenue or public health, right? Because in prior iterations of this discussion, I believe the advocacy for this proposal has been around public health and having less consumption of these beverages. So if the goal is purely revenue or mainly revenue, I'd encourage the committee to consider the implications of passing sort of a sin tax as a stable revenue source. I think a comment similar to what Senator Brock just made, if the tax does its job of discouraging consumption of these beverages, can it be relied upon as a reliable source of revenue in the out years? And additionally, or maybe tangentially related to that, if the main goal is revenue, this is almost certainly going to be a regressive tax. And so is that really how the committee wants to raise that revenue? But if the goal is public health, I'm not a public health expert, so I can't speak to that, and certainly would encourage the committee to speak to the experts in that area. I sincerely don't know, but think it's worth asking the questions about what happens on outcomes from this tax. I'm not aware of any statewide implementations of this tax. I think some cities and more local governments have done it, but I have no idea. Like, does consumption actually decline? And if it does decline, is it a genuine decline, or does it shift to other localities? Do they see increased health outcomes? And I think the other key question on that is that one thing that Abby noted is that there's not a mechanism in the version of the bill that is sitting in the House, at least, to ensure that a company raises only the price of the sugar sweetened product, right? So let's say that this would make the can, if you did 1 cent per ounce, a can of regular soda goes up 12 cents. Does the legislature have an issue if both regular and diet soda go up 6 cents? And the product that you're trying to discourage is no more expensive? Or maybe even more troubling to the committee, does both the regular and the diet soda go up 12 cents a can, and then the company takes an extra 12 cents of profit on the diet soda? So I would really encourage the committee to talk to distributors and wholesalers who would be impacted. And again, I'm not sure if there's research into what the impacts have been on the actual prices in localities that have implemented this. And I think the last thing that I would highlight is that the definitions on at least the version in I think it's H37, and soft drinks that are subject to sales tax are very close, but they're not exact. And while I recognize that the same businesses are not necessarily interacting with both of these taxes at once, because one is a retail tax on the consumer and the other is an excise tax on the distributor, it does create the potential for a lot of confusion if similar businesses in different steps of the distribution channel in the same industry have different definitions, or maybe small businesses who are trying to navigate this themselves believe they've found the definition of a soft drink that's subject to sales tax, but in reality they've found the definition of sugar sweetened beverage. That could lead to confusion. An easy example is that under the language of H37, any juice that had more than 50% but less than 100% fruit juice would be subject to the excise tax and not the sales tax. So it's interesting as well if the legislature is really interested in pursuing this. I'm sort of curious why the very close but not exact definitions are used, and also the distinction between I'm using soda as an example, but like a regular soda that would have some kind of caloric sweetener and a diet soda that doesn't. That this concept distinguishes between, but the sales tax on soft drinks does not. But going back to the bottom line, the governor's not interested in new taxes this year. And I think that this specific proposal has a lot of questions that the committee should consider before proceeding.
Okay, thank you. And if we proceed, we will consider. I think we are just exploring. So committee, any questions for the commissioner? Okay. So I think that is it. Thank you. I think we can go off live. That's it for today.
Ending.